The territory of modern Slovakia has been inhabited since the Paleolithic era, with archaeological evidence dating back over 200,000 years. The region's strategic position in Central Europe, nestled between the Carpathian Mountains and the Danube River, made it a natural crossroads for migrating peoples and a contested prize for emerging civilizations. During the Bronze Age, the area was inhabited by various Celtic tribes, most notably the Boii, who established fortified settlements called Opita. The Romans later conquered parts of southern Slovakia, incorporating it into the province of Pannonia. Roman influence brought advanced engineering, including roads and fortifications along the Danube frontier, but their control remained limited to the southern regions. The migration period brought successive waves of Germanic tribes, Huns, and eventually Slavic peoples. By the 6th century, Slavic tribes had settled permanently in the region, establishing the foundation of Slovak ethnicity. These early Slavs organized themselves into tribal confederations and developed agricultural communities along the fertile river valleys. The 9th century marked Slovakia's first experience as part of a major political entity with the rise of Great Moravia. This early Slavic state, centered in present-day Moravia and western Slovakia, represented the first significant political organization of Slavic peoples in Central Europe. Under rulers like Svatopluk I, Great Moravia became a formidable power, extending its influence across much of Central Europe. The arrival of Byzantine missionaries Cyril and Methodius in 863 proved transformative for Slovak culture. They introduced Christianity and created the first Slavic alphabet, Glagolitic script, which became the foundation for written Slavic languages. This period established Christianity as the dominant religion and created the first written records in a Slavic language, marking the beginning of Slovak literary tradition. The empire's collapse in the early 10th century, hastened by Hungarian invasions and internal political strife, ended this brief period of Slavic independence. However, the Great Moravian legacy of Christianity, literacy, and political organization would profoundly influence Slovak development for centuries to come. Following Great Moravia's fall, Slovakia became incorporated into the Kingdom of Hungary around 1000 CE under King Stephen I. This began nearly a millennium of Hungarian rule that would fundamentally shape Slovak society, politics, and culture. Unlike conquest by foreign powers, Hungarian rule involved significant settlement and integration, creating a complex multi-ethnic society. During the medieval period, Slovakia experienced significant economic and social development. The discovery and exploitation of gold and silver mines, particularly in central Slovakia around Banska Bystrica and Kremnica, made the region economically vital to the Hungarian kingdom. German settlers, invited by Hungarian kings, established mining towns and introduced advanced mining techniques, creating prosperous urban centers. The 13th century brought the Mongol invasions, which devastated much of the region. However, the subsequent rebuilding period saw the construction of numerous stone castles, including Spiš Castle, one of the largest castle complexes in Europe. These fortifications served both defensive and administrative purposes, establishing centers of feudal power throughout the territory. Medieval Slovak society was predominantly agricultural, with a feudal system organizing social relationships. The majority of the population consisted of Slovak-speaking peasants working the land, while nobility was primarily Hungarian or German. Towns developed their own privileges and governance structures, often following German law models, creating islands of urban culture and commerce. The Protestant Reformation reached Slovakia in the 16th century, finding particularly strong support among German urban populations and some Slovak communities. This religious transformation added another layer of complexity to Slovak society and would later influence national consciousness development. The 16th century brought dramatic changes as the Ottoman Empire advanced into Central Europe. The devastating Battle of Mohacs in 1526, where the Hungarian army was crushed and King Louis II killed, led to the partition of Hungary. Slovakia found itself on the frontier between the Ottoman Empire, the Habsburg monarchy, and Transylvania. This period, known as the Turkish Wars, transformed Slovakia into a militarized frontier zone. Numerous fortifications were built or reinforced, and the population lived under constant threat of Ottoman raids. The town of Bratislava, then Pressburg-Pozsony, became the coronation city for Hungarian kings as Buda remained under Ottoman control. The Ottoman presence, while not involving direct occupation of most Slovak territory, profoundly impacted society. Many Slovaks fled northward, while others adapted to frontier conditions. The period saw the rise of irregular military units and a warrior culture that would influence Slovak folklore and national mythology. Counter-Reformation efforts intensified during this period as the Habsburg monarchy sought to restore Catholic dominance. Jesuit missions and educational institutions were established, leading to religious and cultural conflicts that would persist for generations. The 18th century brought relative peace and Habsburg administrative reforms. Empress Maria Theresa and Emperor Joseph II implemented sweeping changes, including educational reforms, religious tolerance measures, and administrative centralization. These reforms modernized Slovak society but also increased German cultural influence. The codification of literary Slovak by Anton Bernoulak in the late 18th century marked the beginning of systematic efforts to develop Slovak national culture. This linguistic work laid the foundation for later national awakening movements and represented the first major step toward modern Slovak identity. The 19th century witnessed the full flowering of Slovak national consciousness. The work of Hudovit Stur, who standardized modern literary Slovak in the 1840s, proved crucial for national development. Stur and his colleagues also promoted Slovak literature, history, and culture, creating the intellectual foundation for national identity. The 1848 revolution swept through the Habsburg Empire, and Slovak intellectuals formulated their first comprehensive political demands. The Slovak National Council, led by Stur, demanded autonomy within Hungary and linguistic rights. Although these immediate goals failed, the revolutionary period established the framework for modern Slovak political thinking. Magyarization policies intensified in the latter half of the 19th century as Hungarian governments sought to assimilate non-Hungarian peoples. Slovak schools were closed, cultural organizations restricted, and Hungarian became the mandatory language of administration and higher education. These policies paradoxically strengthened Slovak national consciousness by creating a sense of common struggle against assimilation. World War I created unprecedented opportunities for Slovak political aspirations. Slovak and Czech leaders abroad, particularly Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk and Milan Rastislav Stefanik, successfully advocated for Allied support of Czechoslovak independence. The Pittsburgh Agreement of 1918 promised Slovak autonomy within a future Czechoslovak state. The collapse of Austro-Hungary in October 1918 led to the proclamation of Czechoslovak independence. For Slovaks, this represented liberation from Hungarian rule and the promise of national development within a Slavic state. The Martin Declaration, issued by Slovak representatives, expressed support for Czechoslovak unity while expecting recognition of Slovak distinctiveness. The interwar Czechoslovak Republic brought significant benefits to Slovakia. Extensive infrastructure development, educational expansion, and industrial growth transformed Slovak society. The literacy rate increased dramatically, Slovak cultural institutions flourished and a modern middle class emerged. Prague's democratic governance contrasted favorably with authoritarian trends elsewhere in Central Europe. However, tensions also emerged within the Czechoslovak framework. Many Slovaks felt that centralization from Prague resembled the previous Magyarization policies. Slovak autonomist movements gained support, advocating for greater self-governance while remaining within Czechoslovakia. The Slovak People's Party, led by Andrej Hlinka, became the primary vehicle for these aspirations. The 1930s brought increasing challenges as economic depression and rising ethnic tensions destabilized the region. The Munich Agreement of 1938, which dismembered Czechoslovakia, created an opportunity for Slovak separatists supported by Nazi Germany. In March 1939, Slovakia declared independence under German pressure, becoming a nominally independent but actually puppet state. The Slovak state, led by Catholic priest Josef Tiso, represented the first independent Slovak political entity in over 1,000 years. But its legitimacy was compromised by Nazi dependence and authoritarian governance. The wartime Slovak government implemented fascist policies, including anti-Jewish legislation and deportations to Nazi concentration camps. Approximately 70,000 Slovak Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, representing one of the darkest chapters in Slovak history. The regime also suppressed democratic opposition and aligned Slovak foreign policy with Nazi Germany. Resistance to the puppet regime gradually organized, culminating in the Slovak National Uprising of August 1944. This massive revolt, supported by Slovak army units, partisans, and allied forces, aimed to overthrow the Tiso government and restore Czechoslovakia. Although ultimately suppressed by German forces, the uprising demonstrated Slovak commitment to democratic values and anti-fascist struggle. The liberation of Slovakia by Soviet and Allied forces in 1945 ended the wartime period and restored Czechoslovak unity. However, the war's legacy of collaboration, resistance, and national trauma would influence post-war Slovak development. The post-war restoration of Czechoslovakia initially brought hope for democratic development and Slovak autonomy. However, the communist coup of 1948 established a totalitarian regime that would govern for 4 decades. Slovak industry was rapidly developed under communist central planning, transforming Slovakia from a primarily agricultural region into an industrial center. Bratislava became a major industrial and administrative center, while new cities like Kazis expanded dramatically. Heavy industry, chemical plants, and arms manufacturing drove economic growth, but also created environmental problems that would persist for decades. Educational opportunities expanded, creating a new generation of Slovak technical and professional elites. The 1960s brought political liberalization under Alexander Dubček, a Slovak who became leader of the Czechoslovak Communist Party. The Prague Spring of 1968 promised democratic reforms and Slovak autonomy, garnering massive popular support. However, the Warsaw Pact invasion of August 1968 crushed these hopes and installed a conservative regime. The following period of normalization involved political repression, economic stagnation, and increased Slovak dissatisfaction with centralized rule from Prague. Underground cultural movements and religious activities maintained alternative values, while economic problems increasingly discredited communist governance. By the 1980s, the communist regime faced mounting challenges from environmental disasters, economic inefficiency, and growing popular opposition. The Chernobyl nuclear accident heightened environmental concerns, while economic reforms in the Soviet Union encouraged similar pressures in Czechoslovakia. The fall of communism began with student demonstrations in Prague on November 17, 1989. quickly spreading throughout Czechoslovakia. The Velvet Revolution, characterized by massive peaceful protests, brought down the communist regime within weeks. In Slovakia, crowds gathered in Bratislava's main square, demanding political change and national recognition. The post-communist transition initially maintained Czechoslovak unity under President Václav Havel and federal structures. However, economic transformation policies and constitutional arrangements increasingly divided Czech and Slovak political leaders. Slovaks worried that rapid market reforms would disadvantage their industrial economy, while constitutional disputes reflected deeper disagreements about federal versus confederal arrangements. The 1992 elections brought victory to parties advocating Slovak independence. Vladimir Makayer's movement for a democratic Slovakia and the Slovak National Party. Negotiations between Czech and Slovak leaders concluded that peaceful separation served both nations' interests better than continued federation. The Velvet Divorce of January 1, 1993, created independent Slovakia through parliamentary votes rather than popular referenda. This peaceful separation contrasted with violent breakups elsewhere in post-communist Europe and demonstrated the maturity of both Czech and Slovak democratic institutions. Independent Slovakia faced immediate challenges of state building, economic transformation, and international integration. The 1990s brought political instability under Prime Minister Vladimir Mahezia, whose authoritarian tendencies and nationalist rhetoric concerned Western allies and delayed European integration. Economic transformation proved painful, with widespread privatization, industrial restructuring, and rising unemployment. However, Slovakia's educated workforce, industrial base, and strategic location attracted foreign investment, particularly in automotive manufacturing. Companies like Volkswagen, PSA Peugeot, Citroën, and Kia established major production facilities, earning Slovakia the nickname Europe's Detroit. Political democratization accelerated after 1998 with the election of a reform coalition led by Mikuláš Dzurinda. This government implemented extensive economic reforms, pursued NATO and EU membership, and strengthened democratic institutions. Slovakia joined NATO in 2004 and the European Union the same year, achieving the strategic goal of returning to Europe. The 2000s brought rapid economic growth, with Slovakia becoming one of Europe's fastest-growing economies. The adoption of the euro in 2009 completed monetary integration with Western Europe. However, regional disparities persisted, with Western Slovakia prospering while Eastern regions struggled with unemployment and emigration. Contemporary Slovakia faces challenges common to post-communist democracies: corruption, populism, and polarization. The 2018 murder of investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée sparked massive protests, demanding political change and rule of law. These demonstrations, known as For a Decent Slovakia, forced Prime Minister Robert Fico's resignation and brought new leadership committed to fighting corruption. Recent years have seen continued economic growth, technological development, and cultural flourishing. Slovakia has become a significant producer of automobiles, electronics, and machinery while developing service industries and tourism. The country's EU membership provides access to markets and development funds, while NATO membership ensures security. Today's Slovakia balances its historical legacy with modern aspirations. The nation has successfully transitioned from communist rule to democratic governance, from central planning to market economy, and from isolation to European integration. While challenges remain, Slovakia has established itself as a stable, prosperous member of the European community while maintaining its distinctive cultural identity and historical consciousness.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more engaging historical content.